Did you import an aircraft engine or aircraft parts in the last year? Did you pay a tariff? You're likely entitled to a refund. We will ask a group of trade and transaction experts how the process works on NBAA Instant Insight. I'm Kristie Greco Johnson, Senior Vice President of Government Affairs for NBAA. Joining us today is Andrew McAllister with Holland Knight, Katie DeLuca with Harper Meyer, and Tobias Kleitman with TVPX. Andrew, I'd like to start with you. Help us understand, what are IEEPA tariffs?
In the international trade world, we seem to love acronyms, so we've added another one to your vocabulary. So IEEPA, which stands for the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, actually dates back to 1977. The Trump administration in early 2025 used this law, I guess, for the first time in a tariff context. In April, there was the so-called reciprocal tariffs, which corresponded to approximately 180 countries around the world. Those came into effect on April 5th. The litigation we're going to be talking about, the refund process, is specific to these IEEPA tariffs. So this does not extend to other trade remedy measures, Section 301, Section 232, and then the newest set of tariffs under Section 122, which at least in part were designed to replace the IEEPA tariffs. Once these tariffs were implemented, they came under legal challenge fairly quickly. It moved through the Court of International Trade, the Appeals Court, and then ultimately up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court in February 20th to be exact, found that these IEEPA tariffs were unlawful. It was beyond the presidential authority in this area.
That's a helpful reminder of what's happened recently. So what you're saying is the president isn't authorized to issue tariffs under IEEPA. So does that mean all the tariffs that were paid over the last year and a half or so have to be reimbursed?
The Supreme Court decision came out on February 20th that essentially ordered refunds to be implemented by Customs and Border Protection. The court has held CBP's feet to the fire, in a sense, to implement this refund mechanism. And so, to CBP's credit, they have moved fairly quickly in implementing this mechanism, again, to enable refunds. And it covers the entire legal period, all the way back to the beginning.
And that sounds like a massive undertaking for CBP. They set up a brand new system to process these refunds as a result of the Court of International Trade decision. What does that system look like?
So I would say, first of all, I think it probably is the largest refund program that Customs has ever implemented. And as we all know, Customs has been around for multiple hundred years. So this is a big deal. The sort of government interface on how imports are declared, how documentation is submitted, is referred to as the ACE portal, Automated Commercial Environment. And so Customs has essentially built a functionality into that ACE portal that Customs refers to as CAPE, Consolidated Administration and Processing of Entries. So pursuant to that functionality, importers are able to consolidate refunds for the IEEPA tariffs. And so the refund constitutes both the overpayment of duties, but also interest on that overpayment. And so Customs has announced that they're doing this in sort of a phased approach. Phase one is going to cover a lot of entries. It covers all unliquidated entries, which are typically entries within about the last 314 days, plus certain entries that have been liquidated for 80 days or less. And so the look back period could be up to 400 days.
We're in phase one right now. For everyone watching, we'll put links to the CAPE portal and more CBP resources in the video caption below. With that, let's turn to Katie and talk to you a little bit more about the details of this process. What does a person need to do to initiate a refund?
This is all very new, as we all know. This was just started at 8 a.m. this morning, so we'll see how everything is working in practice, whether it moves smoothly or if there's any bumps in the road. But as a first step, an importer should identify what entries they made where they paid IEEPA tariffs and confirm that they fall into phase one's current scope. Then we need to determine, do they have access to the ACE portal? They would need to make sure that they have their banking information in the ACE, and they've done the ACH refund enrollment, and they verify that their US bank account information is correct.
So, Katie, who can make the filing?
Well, the filing can be made by either the importer of record or the customs broker that made the initial entry. So to start out, the importer will want to, one, determine, who's going to be making this filing, but also they want to determine what entries they paid IEEPA duties on and whether those entries fall within phase one's current scope. So once we determine who's making the filing party will need to have an ACE secure data portal account set up, and then they'll need to have the importer sub-account set up. So that might take a little time if an account is not already set up. They'll also have to make sure that they have all of their banking information in the ACE portal to enable electronic refunds via the ACH, and they're only accepting US bank account information. So once the filer has gotten into the account, and they'll submit the CSV entry list, sort of like a spreadsheet that just has the separate entry numbers. And then within ACE will verify that CSV filing. They'll do a validation on the file itself and then an entry-specific validation. And assuming that nothing has been rejected, either in whole or in part, then they'll remove the IEEPA tariff and proceed to process the refund, which they're saying that it should take 60 to 90 days to process that.
Okay, so the process works to submit your declaration in bulk to the tool.
Right. And then the refund would be also issued, lump amount.
Okay. You had mentioned this is a tool that's active now. Could someone, an importer of record, submit their declaration today?
Assuming that the portal is running smoothly and it's not overloaded, then yes, a submission could be submitted today. It's in phase one. Nothing's been subject to protest.
Can you remind me again what the scope is for phase one?
It is entries that have been liquidated and entries that are within 80 days of liquidation.
Okay. And is this the only way to generate a refund? For example, if you don't file a CAPE declaration, would you receive a refund automatically?
No, there wouldn't be an automatic refund. You'd have to go through this process to obtain the refund, at least for this, for phase one.
So Tobias, how are you finding the system? Is it complex? Is it straightforward? As a user and someone who's already been into CAPE, what can you tell us about what you've seen?
So we have had clients already going in and setting up their accounts and plugging in their banking information. But on the first day, it was very busy. Our compliance team was unable to get in to get more information on how to properly make these entries. But my understanding is it's not going to be a complicated process. The customs broker that did the entry can do it for you. If you're going to prepare to make the entry, I would make sure you have all the information from those entries that were made where tariffs were paid, that you have all your banking information handy. And if you don't have information, you can always, go to the customs broker that made the entry for you, made the import entry for you, and get what you need.
It sounds like we should expect there may be some delays as everyone floods the system here in the initial days.
I think that's unfortunately, I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for having these tariffs returned, and so, but that will probably wane in a couple of days.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question about how this may work with customers who might have paid a tariff surcharge when they bought an aircraft or a part from manufacturers. How do you expect that situation might be handled?
Unfortunately, I would expect there might be some disputes. They're going to have to look at the contract, talk to their legal advisors, talk to the provider of those goods, the aircraft, the parts, what have you, and have those discussions, one by one.
And similarly, I mean, in a transaction, if you are not the importer of record, but you did pay the tariff or a portion of the tariff, how should that matter be handled?
Well, I think it's the importer of record is going to be the one that is entitled to the refund because they paid the tariff. But if they imported a part, paid a tariff, and then they marked up the part or whatever it happens to be to cover the tariff, and now their importer is getting the funds back, you can see where that would be a windfall for some of these companies. And I think there's going to be a lot of discussions around that with them and their customers.
Yeah, I think this is going to be something that's going to, it's going to be determined by contract, whether or not you've contracted to have the refund submitted to you. I would hope that some of the larger manufacturers would want to the extent it's not covered in a contract, hopefully they, want to accommodate their customers that might have paid a little bit more based on, good customer service. I think where it might be an issue is engine overhaul maintenance situations where it might have been another vendor that has been making the charge with the IEEPA the tariff and then passing that through to the maintenance service provider, and then the maintenance service provider passing that on to the ultimate customer. That's where it might get a little tricky. Even if you do have a contractual situation with the maintenance service provider, they have to then hunt it down. There are some situations where on engine overhauls or in other maintenance where there's actually a third-party vendor that has allegedly incurred the IEEPA tariff and is charging that forward to the MSP provider, who then is charging that forward to the ultimate customer. So when there's multiple parties in the chain, that makes things a little bit more difficult in determining what, if any, recourse the ultimate customer might have.
Katie, you also raised earlier, there may be importers of record that do not have a U.S. bank account, and there may be challenges with processing a refund. Can you talk to me about what that challenge might be?
If the importer doesn't have a U.S. bank account, they can still pursue the CAPE refund claim, but CBP is unlikely to disperse the IEEPA refund until an ACH-capable U.S. banking information has been set up in ACE. I do think that it might be possible, just for the purpose of the refund itself, is to designate a customs broker through using Form 4811 to have the customs broker receive the refund. I believe that is something that might be available.
Certainly, if the customs broker made the initial filing, the customs broker ought to be able to put the refund in on behalf of the foreign party.
CBP has just kicked off phase 1. What should we expect in phase 2?
I would say don't hold your breath on phase 2. Obviously, we've just kicked off phase 1. There are, some growing pains that we're aware of. There will probably be more growing pains as we move through the process. And so what I would say is, again, right, there's going to be some refinement to the phase 1 CAPE functionality. And I would say in some respects, phase 2 and other subsequent phases are going to build off phase 1. One sort of interesting point is, again, phase 1 is sort of taking the lowest hanging fruit. Phase 2 or subsequent phases, which may be of interest to this audience, are things like entries that have been designated for a drawback claim. And so at present, if there is a drawback claim associated with the entry, it's not eligible for phase 1. So again, we're going to see things along the lines of drawback. Also, we've sort of curtailed the universe as unliquidated entries. So again, those are some of the possibilities for phase 2, but I think the customs is going to be pretty bogged down here for at least the very near term on phase 1.
Well, we'll stay tuned as the process develops. Thanks to Andrew, Katie, and Tobias for joining us today to shed more light on the tariff refund process. Please refer to the caption below for more resources. And thanks again for joining us for this NBAA Instant Insight.